Welcome to the Let It Bleed podcast, a place where you can hear the liquor-fueled ramblings of two narcissistic wizards who conjure the essence of inspirational people every week and bring it straight to you.
And just how do you plan on doing that? Magic. Motherfucker.
And now for the wizards themselves, David Amaya and Phil Arroyo.
Welcome once again, everybody. We have a very special show for you today. It was fun rekindling old friendship with a person I used to work with. And just kind of randomly, after a few years of not seeing them when I worked with them, just hit me up and said, "Hey, I'm going on your podcast." And they said, "Hey, welcome to the Let It Bleed podcast." No, but she...
Well, I am damn glad that she did, because that was fascinating. And I always love getting somebody in here who is this subject matter expert that is outside of really, the both of what we know. And I always just love, I get that little dopamine rush every time I genuinely learn something or something that's like super insightful. And man,
yeah, it was really cool because she reminded me of how many years it's been since I've seen her, and it's easy to lose track of those things because, we're always so busy and we're always pursuing what we're doing. But it's been really cool because in the time since I've last seen her, I could say that I've definitely moved all over the place with what I wanted to do in life. And it seems as though, even though she's probably, definitely developed so much further into what she initially wanted to do, I know that she's been passionate about this particular field for a long time, and that is, kind of guiding students and childhood development and blooming their minds.
Yeah, we didn't really get into it, so I didn't call it out as it was happening, but I thought it was fantastic the way that she laid out her story about how she got to the place where she is now, and there's still plenty of room for her to grow. So we talked about what she wants to do in the future, but going through what she the different interests that she had, how she thought it was like one thing and then it went to another, how she had herself, how she was thinking about getting into fashion before she really got into this, because she realized she didn't have the passion for that like she does for this. And I know you guys weren't in the room when she was talking about it, but you could see it in her face that, it's a special thing when you can see somebody who genuinely cares so much about the thing that they're talking about. And I think we stayed true to our word this week, like we do every week, but this week in particular, about, getting that essence of passion in there, having somebody come on and talk about what they truly care about and educate us and, hopefully you guys along the way. I thought it was awesome.
Yeah, most definitely. It reinstilled a sense of hope for the educational system, at least, for me, because it's kind of easy to just get,
cynical.
Cynical. You kind of feel defeated with, from over 10 years ago when I was in high school, and seeing how just like standardized testing kind of governed, what schools got the most funding and what programs you get, and also there's budget cuts, and you kind of just you see all of the things that go wrong with schools or that could be better, and you don't really think about the positive. But I needed to hear what was being told, because she was able to basically make me remember that not just with this but with everything else in life, it's a choice on how you look at a situation and where you can go from there. Instead of worrying about a problem, okay, how can we make this better? And so, showing us that there are ways to make teachers and counselors have more passion and to not give up, not to feel defeated by, the restrictions that are placed upon them by being in the school system or anything like that, and to actually talk amongst each other to build that passion and to really focus on what's important, and that is understanding how these kids are most effectively learning.
And it was heartening to me to hear her talk, somebody who's so passionate about it, and for her to talk about, the environment that she's working in with people who are, presumably equally as passionate, and how the trend is, okay, everybody understands that standardized testing and putting these kids in little cubicles and boxes is not really fostering a long-term care. And she had some brilliant insights that made so much sense to me. And if that's the kind of good work that they're doing over there in education, then it makes me happy to at least see something that I can mark on my timeline in my, my way that I view the world, and go, okay, things are getting better. We're learning and we're going in the right direction.
Right.
And so, yeah, what a wholesome show. And
Absolutely.
she defined what I think is a grit that I'm definitely going to steal this grit.
Yeah.
You know, she talked about fostering the grit in a child, like somebody who just wants to learn, who's got the passion, who's got the drive, and having that be so much more valuable than, you know, maybe something that's inherent, like, you know, like intelligence or, you know, being good with numbers or something like that. Like fostering that, the ethic and the good mindsets, these, you know, blooming mindsets. I'm not even sure if I'm using that right. I just wanted to work that in a very corny way. But yeah, she had grit, man.
She had
grit. I'm inspired.
Speaking of timelines, though, so let's talk about a couple other things that we've got going up. This week, we have the comedy show on Thursday.
That's right. If you guys are hearing this on the day that we released it, and you fucking better,
Yeah.
then there is hopefully still some tickets left for you guys to go and check out my boy Joe Ural record his half-hour comedy special at the Rec Room in Huntington Beach. That is Not Special. That's what he's calling it. And it's a hilarious title. And of course, opening for him is going to be last week's guest, Miss Lydia Shaheen, good friend of mine, very, very funny chick. And I mean, I've seen this guy perform. I've seen all the people that are actually on that lineup do their thing, and they are some funny people. So you guys, Huntington Beach, like, support the local scene here. There is great comedy going on. So expand your mindset. You know, you don't need to go buy a $200 Kevin Hart stadium seats. Okay, yeah. It's right here for $10 when you use the promo code Lydia at checkout. So if you go to notspecial.live, definitely take advantage of that. I will be there. Come say hello and buy me a drink.
Yeah.
And what else we got coming up this week?
Well, next Wednesday night in Santa Ana at the Copper Door, we are going to be doing another event, or I'm going to be live painting at another installment of The Big Draw. It's really cool. It's a free cover. You just come in, you know, buy yourself some drinks, you hang out, get some food, snacks, and you sit down at this big table where there's paper spread all across it, and you could just draw. Everybody just gets down and draws, but you know, there's going to be music, there's going to be live artists like myself that you could just check out. It's just a fun time. So be sure to do that. And speaking of art, we are actually doing a collaboration, Art in the Park, with Psychedelic Lions Den. We are going to be teaming up with Regal Collective. Ooh. And we are going to be doing a 6-month anniversary extravaganza.
Ooh.
And we've got some really
chills.
Cool surprises for you guys. You know, we're just so stoked that we've been doing this from 6 months ago, which, you know, really doesn't seem like that long of time, but I mean, we've just grown so much in that last 6 months from the time that we just said, you know, we're just going to go to the park and make some art with each other. We've got so many people that have come out and, you know, enjoyed a Sunday in the park doing what they'd love to do, and people discovering what they love to do. So if you have not come yet, then come. And if you have come, bring people, because you know that it's fun, and it's going to be that much cooler this time around. We've got some really awesome surprises for you, and we'll get more into that later. But April 15th in Buena Park, stay tuned. We will keep you updated on links and everything like that.
Yeah, of course, you guys. You can always check the show notes and check us out on social media at Let It Bleedcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for updates and really easy, clickable stuff for all this. So don't worry, don't crash the car, don't pull over and try to remember what all these things are. I got you, fam. I got you. Don't worry. I've been taking notes.
You'll always be woke with Phil telling you.
I will keep you woke. Yeah, I want to do like a 2-minute like woke corner. Like, hey, here's some crazy shit that you should know.
Have you seen that show? No, not to get too off rails shows now, because I always
fuck it,
do
let's
that,
get off rails.
Yeah, the On My Block. It's on Netflix. It's pretty funny. It's like kind of one of those just, you know, coming of age stories that you know, there tends to be a lot of those ones that get really played out on like Netflix or Hulu or whatnot. But this one's actually really good. It's about these kids in like the hood that grow up and you know, like kind of dealing with just going into high school and like, you know, kind of falling for each other as friends, but also having like a friend of theirs who's like part of a gang, getting like, into the gang because his brothers are into it. So
Okay.
it's this whole thing. But there's a kid that's like this really, just eccentric child. He's just like, he says he claimed, I forget exactly how he said it, but he was just like, see, I'm woke. And she's like, you can't claim to be woke. Somebody has to tell you.
It sounds like The Chi. Have you heard of that?
No.
It's a new show. Season 1 just ended. We got into it. It's on Showtime, and it is. I mean, it sounds exactly like that.
Is that the thing that Bill Murray was doing, like the Chivon, keep calm and Chivon thing? No, has nothing to do with that.
No,
Okay.
this is about the South Side of Chicago.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, yeah.
So
not related.
Yeah, no. Bill Murray, as far as I know, is not in it. But yeah, no, that's also a great story. Like
He'll probably make an
about
appearance at
exactly
some
what you're
point.
talking about. And there's a couple eccentric kid characters in there. One who's just like one where it's like it made me so happy watching him throughout the season. I'm like, oh god, they're gonna kill him, aren't they? But they didn't. So it was good.
Nice.
Oh wait, spoiler alert. Fuck, I'm terrible at this. Anyways,
So
moving
check both
forward.
of those out, the Chive and On My Block. But yeah,
And then tell us which one was better. Who has better taste?
or who has better networks, and that's probably you, because I'm very limited to what I have. So yeah, check that out.
I know how to steal shit. All right, so you guys, of course, be sure to check out everything that is. I mean, I guess we're not quite set up yet, but at blooming_mindsets, that's multiple mindsets. That is where you're going to find Ericka and her stuff on Instagram right now. And I'm sure it's going to blossom into something pretty fabulous coming up soon. So you guys make sure and give her a follow and support a super, good and noble cause.
Especially if you are an educator and you are looking for ways to, get more passionate. She's going to go into telling you this thing that she's developing to where you guys could all. It's basically like. What would you say? Like what site? Like an Etsy or like, a Pinterest or something for like teachers that, you can browse through and find these, curriculums or packets or methods that other teachers are using, and you could support each other by buying them. It's teachers paying teachers.
Yeah,
because you
that
guys,
was cool. I hadn't heard of that before.
yeah, that's really neat because obviously we know that the government's not giving the teachers enough money for their schooling. We can spend a lot of money on,
But they're
lots
giving
of
them
things.
guns and buckets of rocks. In
Apparently they
Pennsylvania.
all need guns, and the military needs more weapons that because we can't blow up the world 3 times over already. So
Yeah. Did you hear in Pennsylvania there's a school that gave every teacher a bucket of rocks in case of a live shooting like incident or whatever they call it?
a bucket of rocks.
Yeah, so if somebody comes to the door with a gun, you've got a classroom full of kids with rocks and they will throw rocks at them to get them to go away. That's the plan.
Desperation.
That's the plan.
At its
I cannot
worst.
fucking believe this. So it's good to hear positive stories about real, educators talking about education, people whose job this is, and not.
I'm surprised they didn't just
yokels.
propose that they would give all the students guns.
I mean, they basically are. What the fuck do you think? Like, it hasn't even started yet, and a teacher already accidentally shot a student, like 2 weeks ago.
No, really?
Yeah.
Damn. I was watching this Looney Tunes episode where it was like the Wild West, and it like was a parody of like everybody just shooting each other up, and then like there was a part where the horses even get up and like they start shooting at the people, and I was just like, this is America right now. This is what's coming down to. It's crazy.
Oh my god.
But
yeah.
On a lighter note, Ericka, we get into a whole topic of discussion on education, which has nothing to do with those, sad tragedies, fortunately. So
Yeah, if you want to feel better about the world, listen to this one.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's
Cool.
Yeah. So I think that is about it for us.
So yeah, you know where to follow us. Me always on Instagram at HoodRatStuff with 3 Fs, and the Psychedelic Lions Den for the art. Phil at Nobody Cares Phil
On
and
Instagram and at Phil Nobody Cares on Twitter. And that is good for me.
Yeah, Lena, let's, without any further ado, get into this conversation that we have with Ericka. And you know what? As always, we're going to go ahead and let it bleed.
Let her. Oh man, we were so close. Do it again. Are we gonna do it again?
Do the whole
Okay,
thing again.
Yeah, let's record that intro again.
Do the whole thing again.
Tilly's has a bunch of impulse buy, shit on the
knives that
are colored on the edge. Okay, not quite that. I'm getting there. Okay. So the knife stuck in the chair. That was deeply stuck in the chair. Okay. Sure. So we went to Tilly's. We bought a Batman multi-tool that looks like, looks like one of the batarangs that he throws. And then we're like, well, this isn't any fun if we can't really throw it. And so we took the bottom of, like the cardboard bottom of a case of Hurricanes. We painted a target on it, and we were throwing them at, we set them up on that chair, and we were throwing the thing at the chair.
Okay.
We weren't having as good a luck, and we're like, you know what, let's find some other shit to throw. So she pulls out her pocket knife, and we threw it a couple times in the room. We're like,
and it landed like that.
By the second time of it flying around, like across the room, we went, okay, maybe we should take this outside.
Yeah.
And so then we were like just full force flinging it down there. And then that was the last throw of the night. I was like, all right, we'll do one good one where it sticks. And then it hit that, and it stuck. We're like, you know what? That was pretty metal. I don't think we can top that. And so we just left it there.
There you go. Well, so I guess we have to say on this podcast episode where we're going to be talking about developing children's minds that we shouldn't be.
We should
start out with
the, don't throw knives, kids.
Oh my god!
Don't be throwing knives.
Anyway.
I know, right? Well, you did it. You guys weren't paying attention to my growth mindset. You guys were just like setting me up for failure right there by putting knives on my fucking chair.
I feel like what I'm looking at is like two very distinct yet effective ways of teaching. You're like psychology and science based one where things are backed up. It was there. Dave's got a knife.
In general though, like her and I, this is kind of the dynamic that's like gone back since as long as I've known her. Like when we worked together, we worked at a restaurant together. We worked at Joe's Crab Shack together, and so she would always be like try to tell me about because she's been passionate about what she's doing for a long time, and obviously like going to school for it, and it's really cool to see that she's actually doing something with it now. But before it would always be like, don't say that, don't do that, kids. I'm the total opposite type of person where it's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go. You know what I mean? Like the worst person to put around kids. Like absolutely the worst person.
All right, well then that's good that we have a counterbalance now to educate us.
Absolutely,
yeah, definitely. So, I mean, I'm on here because I'm super passionate about like my latest work, I guess. I don't have much developed, but I have something in the works, and so I changed my Instagram name. Originally, I was Storytime Counselor, and I started by creating YouTube videos and reading children's books about topics that are difficult that often parents or even adults don't know how to explain to a young child, such as divorce or...
yeah, I actually saw some of those. I saw the Divorced Dinosaur one, and I saw the thing up there.
Oh, cool. And so even just emotions and social emotional development and those things. And it started because I had a 6th grade student whose dad was in a coma, and he didn't want to talk about it, but he loved YouTube, and he just loved spending time in my classroom. And so I was like, how can I get him to kind of process his father's death, like indirectly without him really knowing? So I said, hey, start up a YouTube for me, which he did, and he walked me through the whole thing. And then I bought my first book, which is Death, and I don't actually know the title right off the bat, but it
that's
basically
a pretty metal name for a kid's book right there.
Death.
Just Death.
No, it was like something like Walking Through Death or something of that sort. And so I recorded it, and so the way that I got him to, I guess, process the death was I would tell him, like, go watch my video when you're home. And then when you come back from school, like, let me know what I can change and what I can do. And I can see the views. And so I would see that it, one view turned to 10 and 13 and, and so that was my way of just being able to counsel him without him obviously being ready to talk to me. And so that's just kind of how that YouTube started. I fell off the wagon a bit because life happened. I got married and I started my master's program.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And so now, maybe about a month or two, I started an LLC called Blooming Mindsets. And so I started it because, one, I envision myself as an entrepreneur, and I feel like anybody in education, we have so many resources to provide the world. And often the government does not pay us enough that you have to seek other outlets for income, and also it's a community within itself. And so there's a really big community on Instagram within teachers. Counselors are starting to be built within then. And the one of the websites, Teachers Pay Teachers, is a website where teachers can upload their resources, their lesson plans, kind of what they're doing, and other teachers can buy it. So that way it just creates like a really great learning community. And so I just figured, you know what? I am very passionate about counseling. Oftentimes, because teachers don't have that training, you know, they go to school to learn how to teach, there's gaps within the classroom with whether it's knowing why behavior is happening or how to deal with behavior or how to even talk to sometimes to children who are experiencing trauma or just difficult times in their lives. And so I thought, you know, if I can maybe bridge what I know with teachers, then hopefully it can create just a overall better learning experience for these kids. And so that's just kind of how it started. And my whole platform is through this growth mindset.
That is awesome. Yeah.
Well, as long as I've known you, you've been studying child development, and that seems to be your passion since like the very beginning. So what was it like? When would you say that you kind of realized that you wanted to be a counselor?
You know, I was going to school to be a teacher, and then I was in the classroom doing my hours, and there was one particular student that you can just, you know, with my knowledge that I had, I knew he had some type of intellectual disability or ADHD or maybe trauma. Like there was something going on. This child could not sit still. You know, he had really big issues building relationships with students. He just wasn't listening and kind of did his own thing. You can tell the class was so annoyed with him and didn't want him near him. So overall, it just seemed like, I don't know, this kid was crying for help. And this was second grade. He's now probably a seventh grader. Mm-hmm. And so with teachers and their big, like their loads in the classroom are so big that it's really hard when you have a very difficult child like that to give them that one-on-one, because you have your other 25 to 30 kids in the class. And so because I was volunteering and doing my hours, I kind of took the kid under my wing and I tried to figure out like, okay, what is he good at? How can I build his strengths to then be able to maybe work with him on what he needs to do in the classroom? And so I saw that he loved manipulatives and working with his hands and putting things together. And so I just went and I bought puzzles and I brought in crafts. And before I kind of made him the leader because he was so good at putting puzzles together and utilizing craft activities. I kind of made him have the leadership role and teach the other kids. And by the end of my hours, this kid was now liked by the class. He was able to at least be redirected. I was talking to the teacher about, you know, what can we do? Can we bring his parents in? Unfortunately, he was one of 10 kids. Parents both worked. Yes.
Oh, wow.
Both parents worked like 2 jobs. And so, you know, without parents actually showing up, there's very little that teachers or counselors or even principals can do. And so, but at least I got to see a glimpse of being able to acknowledge like the humanistic characteristics in someone and being able to change those behaviors. And so that's when I was like, I just loved what I did for this kid. I really, at the end of the day, I was like, I don't even care if he knows what 2 + 2 is, because he needs to learn how to be friends with someone. He needs to learn how to sit down.
He needs to learn how to learn.
Yeah, exactly. And so I was like, that's what I want to, like, I want to get the kids that are probably like really rough and then figure out like how we can get their foundations in so that they can then truly learn in the classroom. And so because of him, I was like, I'm going to be a social worker or a therapist. And I went on that path. And it wasn't until I applied for a marriage and family therapist program at Cal State Fullerton. I got denied. At the time I was teaching at a nonprofit. I was teaching positive social, emotional life skills. And I got denied. I was devastated because I just thought, okay, what next? And one of my coworkers, her name's Echo. She's now a school counselor, and I owe her my career because she kind of saw that I was bummed out, and she's like, you know, what's going on? I told her, and she's like, well, what do you want to do? And so I'm like, you know what? I love what I'm doing now. I'm in the classroom, but I'm teaching just life skills, like positive things. I'm building self-esteem. And she's like, you're a school counselor. And I said, oh, what? And she's like, you're a school counselor. And so I was like, okay, should I just look into it? Let me know. So I did. And then within a couple months, I applied at the University of Laverne. I got in and 2 years later, I graduated, and now I'm a counselor. And so, yeah, I'm really proud of just kind of how life happens. And I guess I believe in energy, and when you follow your passion, just the universe sets things up for you.
Manifestation.
Yeah, and so now I'm here.
Would you say though, with with the counselor thing, because obviously a lot of people are trying to be teachers, and
Yes.
it's kind of difficult to get jobs as being a teacher these days, especially in the field that you want, unless it's math or sciences. At least that's what I've heard. But
Okay.
was there a lot of competition with like to be a counselor?
You know what? Yes.
Really?
And the competition is pretty high, just because, as for teachers, I mean, yes, there's sometimes there's lack of jobs, not so much, because we have a lot of the baby boomers starting to retire. So there is a lot more teacher jobs. But, there's like 38 teachers to one counselor. And usually counselors are mostly seen or acknowledged at the high school level. And so at the middle school level, I'm fortunate to be one of two. And so at the elementary level, it's very rare that districts, at least here in California, because of budgeting and just, I guess, their beliefs, to have a counselor at the elementary level. And so, but again, just working hard and preaching what you love, I was able to actually get my full-time counseling position a year before I even graduated my graduate program. And so it was through going back to my own community and my home district, and going back to, the counselor that I felt had a really big impact. She wasn't my counselor, but I knew she just was amazing to other people. I went back. I worked hard. She gave me a good reference. I saw the job opening and I just applied. I didn't even graduate. I didn't have a credential, but I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do it. And I just started applying, and sure enough, I got an interview, and it was kind of rough though. I'll say this. So I got an interview. The next day, they're like, we want to move you forward in the hiring process. I'm like, cool. I quit my counselor intern position at the district that I was interning at. 5 weeks later, HR calls and they're like, you know what? We can't hire you because you don't have your master's or your credential.
Oh, what the?
So
Oh,
I know,
man.
right? So I cried a river for a day, and then I'm like, there's no way. Like, this can't be happening. I left my counselor intern position that I was getting paid for this job, and now I have nothing. How am I going to finish my hours, my program? And so I contacted another counselor within the district. I said, hey, you know what? I just need to do my hours. Let's move forward. And it so happened that at my counselor intern position the year before, one of the 5th grade teachers retired and became a board member at the district that I'm at now. So I contact her and I'm like, hey, what's going on? Help me out. And she loved me. And she always kept telling me, hey, I want you in my district. And so I contacted her. She contacted superintendent. The next day I had HR calling me back and saying, hey, send us your units. They were kind of, I don't know, they were like, who's this girl that now has a superintendent involved and a board member? And I got the job. And so now I'm here.
Persistence.
So yeah, it's that, again, it's kind of that growth mindset of, okay, failures suck, right? But then it's like, okay, what do you need to do now? Or how can you move forward? And so that's what growth mindset is all about, is, when you find a failure, is figuring out, well, what's my next step, or how can I fix this so that I can be empowered or move on.
Cool. Well, that's awesome. So what you were talking about earlier was some books. Like, what are some of the books? Like, I haven't obviously read any of those children's books. Are we talking like Dr. Seuss books? Are we talking like
No.
what kind of books are we talking about? Because I'm really interested, because I'm started illustrating myself, and I kind of got into the idea of trying to create a new version of kids books.
Well, don't be taking my ideas, because that's definitely what I'm in the works of doing. But just some of the books that I have on my.
So who do you got drawing the illustrations for your books? Or are they not going to be illustrations?
Well, I've been doing some research, and I guess when you send your manuscript to a publisher, you actually don't get to, according to the. Google, you don't really get to pick your illustrator right away. It's just kind of like you're throwing your idea out there, hoping someone's going to take it, and they kind of provide illustrators for you. I'm guessing you get to pick according to your theme and story. Because yeah, definitely, as far as illustrators, I have my brother-in-law. So he's my sister-in-law's brother.
Right.
Brother-in-law. He has been working on my logo and creating templates for me. And so he hasn't graduated, but he's super passionate about it. So I would love to have him as my illustrator one day. But obviously through my research, I'm like, okay, well, I just got to throw myself out there first and then help the people who have helped me after. But yeah, some of the books that are out there, one of my first books that kind of made me like fall in love with the idea of, it's called Bibliotherapy, is Cupcake. And it's a simple story of a plain vanilla cupcake. And he has siblings who are super colorful and they all have something creative about them. And so he goes on this journey of like, what's so special about me? I'm plain. And so he meets, oh my God, it's been a while since I've been out of the elementary game. But he meets, I think it's a squirrel or a pea. And so this like pea starts to give him ideas of how to become more creative or be a better cupcake. And so everything he tries on just doesn't fit. And eventually he just kind of comes to the conclusion that he's special just the way he is, being vanilla, being plain, because that's what makes him special. And so that was one of the first books that I utilized to kind of have that discussion with kindergartners about like what makes you special, or like what do you have to offer that nobody else does. And so I think that's the magic of these children's books and just books in general that talk about topics that no one's really maybe asking kids sometimes.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that was one of the first books.
Well,
I mean, that's some heavy stuff that I think a lot of, that's relevant to teenagers and stuff like that. So breaking those concepts down to, to be able to speak to the kids at that level, that is, I mean, that's not easy to do.
I think realistically too, I wouldn't steal your idea because I couldn't relate to kids as well. And because I feel like I am a big kid. I think that I would do the same thing, but for adults, because I think adults could benefit from this sort of thing too, like in a very like simple way. If you
Yes. And one of my favorite, like I'm obsessed with Dallas Clayton. Part of my, my husband proposed with the Dallas Clayton art piece. And so he writes children's books, but he also has kind of adult books. And it's very poetic in a sense where, one of his favorite quotes that I like to constantly say is, life is tough, but so are you. And so he just has very like poetic things about, what, things happen, but let's move forward. And as adults, we don't have it all together, but we also have to just keep going. And so, but how special would it be to be able to instill that in a child so that when they're an adult, it's second nature. You don't even have to struggle through that. You just kind of, you're there, you're being successful.
We're instilled with so many of these, I mean, I guess they're called platitudes now, but they're just these core, pieces of life that are like always true. And you see them in all these kids' books. And they get, amplified and sometimes a little bit distorted as you become an adult. But that is so, I mean, relevant to anybody. Anybody can take those same concepts and really put it in there and have that drive their story, their art, whatever it might be. So that's awesome.
Yeah. And not all children books, like, there's very specific ones like Wilma Jean, The Worry Machine by Julia Cook, which is one of my second books that I utilize, and it's talking really about anxiety and what to do with things that you, it walks through this little girl about, okay, anxiety is real, worries are real, but what can we do about them? And so they kind of walk her through talking about things you can control and things that you can't. And so, those books are very specific, counseling related, therapeutic, but then there's simple children's books like, I don't know.
Everybody poops.
Which one?
Everybody poops. Hop on pop.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to classes.
I think I've seen that one.
Hop on
but
Pops
I'm
with
trying
Dr.
to
Seuss.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's another one? It's like the giraffe can't dance. And so through that story, I mean, it's nothing very like specific, but it talks about this giraffe that can't dance. He's being laughed at. And then eventually he finds his grooves and everybody likes him because he's just doing his own thing. So you can always, I feel like you can take literature and if you reframe it in a positive way or in a way that creates growth, then you can have those really deep discussions, even if the kid is 5 years old.
Mm.
Or we could teach the giraffes to dance.
That
what they've always wanted to do. Wow, I like that concept already.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what was that word you used before? Bibliotherapy?
Bibliotherapy, yeah.
Okay. Would you say that's like the overarching umbrella? I'm just taking the words there and,
Yeah.
Assuming what that's therapy through books, right?
Pretty much.
Okay.
So it's being able, with, like I said, like with small children at 5, they might not be able to express like very structured conversations such as, my daddy left and I'm sad, because developmentally their brains are not developed yet. But, if you show them a story about a fish whose dad died, you might be like, oh, how do you think that fish felt? And the kid might be like, that, sad. He maybe cries at night, which kind of gives you an idea of maybe what the child is going through. And then you can walk them through that in an indirect way. Because again, kids don't often know.
Okay, so that's using the books as like a jumping off point for you to start digging in there and seeing
definitely.
kind of where, the heart of some of these issues might be.
Yeah, and it's just like play therapy. Sometimes therapists will give a child like a Barbie and a like toy boy Barbie, I guess. And so they're like, oh, play house. And so the kids will just play house, but the therapist will get to see like, oh, is dad yelling at mom, or how is mom reacting? Because they're really going to, they learn from observed behavior. So they're really just gonna go in and do what they know. And so that gives a lot of information to the therapist to be like, oh, okay, I think it paints a picture as to what may be going on. So then they can provide appropriate resources for the child, or conversations, I guess.
That's fascinating. I like that.
Yeah.
So you you kind of realized while you were going on the path to being a teacher what your particular niche was going to be. You've discovered what your passion was through that. Now, when you decided initially to just go the teaching route, what was that like for you? Because I personally did the same thing too, but I don't even really know why. I just was like, oh, this is something I think I could do. What were you super passionate about teaching one thing back then?
You know what? No, I was on when I graduated high school, I didn't necessarily know if I was going to go to college. I kept saying that I wasn't, just because, again, I wasn't educated on there's FAFSA, or these are your resources or options. And so, my mom's a chemist in Mexico, but she doesn't know how to navigate the educational world here in the United States. And so there was only, she could just support me and be like, yeah, I wish you the best, but couldn't really walk me through that stuff. And so 2 months before senior year, and I loved fashion. I still do. Not that you can tell very much, but
I was going to say, God, why didn't you dress up for coming here?
You know what? If only people can see these leopard shoes.
They actually do look pretty cool.
Yeah. And
It's okay. I'm wearing climbing pants, and Phil's wearing he's got a gap between his long socks and his sweatpants.
Long socks with stripes. I'm styling the fuck out of it. No, that's why we do an audio only podcast, man. So I don't have to dress up for any of this.
Yeah.
But my passion was fashion, and I thought I wanted to be a fashion merchandiser to purchase clothes for big stores. And I thought that was my passion. I picked Fullerton College because they had a good fashion program. And, like any community college, you start with your general ed. And my third year came up. I kind of had to make a decision. At that moment, I realized I loved clothes, but did I love it enough to just make a life out of it? I loved clothes, but I also realized that's just very materialistic, and it's just clothes. How happy or what a difference can I really make with clothes? Not that you can't. There's plenty of ways now, especially with ethical consumption, which that's another passion of mine now. But at the moment, I was like, you know what? I don't know. I have to pick something. I come from a family of educators. My aunt was a principal. Lots of my cousins are teachers. And my mom always told me, you're going to be a great teacher. My teachers would tell me, you're going to be a great teacher, because I was always the teacher's helpful pet, I guess, in the class. And I was always a little bit advanced than others, so I would teach them. And so that was always in the back of my mind. And I always thought, that's going to be my plan C. There's no way. So I took a child development class, and then I did really well because I liked learning about how a baby grew in the womb, ironically. And so I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to become a teacher just to pick something. And, it just turned out that it really was one of my passions. And so sometimes I know adults can tell kids, oh, you're going to be a lawyer or you're going to be a doctor. And sometimes they do it for their own, I guess, selfish benefit. But in this case, I wish I would have just kind of listened to those that truly cared about me and were around me, because maybe I would have started a little bit earlier. But, you know, again, failures lead you to the right way sometimes.
Yeah, it all kind of
Absolutely.
shapes, you know, who you are. And maybe, you know, who knows? Maybe if you had always gone this route, what if you're like, I wonder what it would have been like to be like in fashion or be a fashion merchandiser. But now you've actually explored that road a little bit and realized that it wasn't quite as fulfilling as the teaching is.
Well,
you
let's-
know? So
definitely.
that informs, you know, how good you are now at this.
Go back to ethical consumption. Tell us more about that.
Oh my God. So I'm obsessed with a middle school history teacher on Instagram. Her name is Too Cool for Middle School. And I hope I don't sound psycho, but I just think like she's so cool because of just her stance and how passionate she is about one, history and her students, and just about the world. And I watched a documentary a couple months ago, and it was like fast fashion. It's on Netflix, and you know, through that I realized just how through fashion people have almost become more poor. In the documentary, it talks about how our middle class has decreased as our clothing price minimized. So for example, you know, you have Forever 21, you can go buy a camisole for maybe $3. And so we've now created this mindset of consumerism where, oh, that shirt's $3, no big deal. I'll go buy one today. Even if it gets ruined after 2 washes, no big deal. It's $3. But
Yeah.
it's this same mindset of, okay, well, you're spending $3 every 3 weeks for the same camisole. You could have spent that on a more like ethical brand that maybe would have cost you a little bit more up front, like $30, but this shirt would last you 2-3 years.
Right.
And so I was like, oh my God, that, like, why didn't I ever think of that? And so that kind of started the whole process of me buying only what I needed, not so much what I wanted.
Yeah.
And creating capsule clothing. So just buying really plain clothing that you can mix and match and still be fashionable and ethical. And, you know, when I started following this teacher on Instagram, she did she just kind of started talking about ethical clothing and fair wage clothing, about where we're buying our clothes and where we're putting our money towards. And I just, you know, I've come to the conclusion where I just want to be really intentional of where my money goes. I don't want to give it to big corporations so that, you know, CEOs can go buy their 4th summer home.
Right.
Like, I'd rather buy something that's going to be within my own community, that's going to really help maybe a parent provide something for their child instead of someone who doesn't even know who I am, you know? And so that just kind of started the whole, that whole conversation and mindset. And so now I'm really being more intentional about where I'm buying, even how much clothes I own, and like having a minimalist mindset, which my husband, you know, kind of thinks I'm crazy about. But,
Well,
you know,
that's super trendy right now. I've seen a bunch of that on Instagram.
Well, that's what I was
too,
going to say.
minimalism.
Yeah. Well, trendy. See, here's the thing: is I can't tell whether it's an uprising trend or whether it's always been there, and I was just always way more of the person that would buy, because I still do look and see so many superficial people that are buying and consuming.
Yeah.
Like they're just buying, and it's ridiculous. But like I do see. They're, at least maybe now, just because I'm in it, more of
Yeah.
this support your local artist, support your local this, support
No,
local business.
I can say it's definitely been something that has been on the rise.
Right.
Like that, the whole minimalism mindset. You know, there
It's great.
actually has been
Yeah.
like a big jump in that
And I
too, because
think
people
we-
are all starting to understand exactly what you're talking about.
It's
yeah.
great because I personally stress the fuck out all the time because I have so much shit, and I don't want to call or put like my dad or my sister or anybody, the family members on blast, but like, you know, it's kind of like growing up in a household where it's like always save things because you never know when you could need them, especially if you're not like, you know, like super wealthy to where you could just afford to dispose of anything, that, you know, like just get rid of things. So it's kind of like this thing, you know, my dad would always bring home stuff and it was just like, do you think you might need this? And it's like in my head, like, no, not really. But, you know, we're just like, okay, we're taught to just save it for another thing. And at least my dad's really organized, you know, he could like store and put things away. My shit is like all over the place. And it's like coming home.
Well,
when
that is a well understood like topic of when you look at the mindset of people who you know have been economically disadvantaged. You know, it's like a poor mindset is having to save things like that because
Yeah.
you know, maybe if you're better off, you know, you're like, oh, okay, these clothes I can donate, this couch I can go put out there. And I was like just reading this week, so it's interesting that you bring that up. How, you know, you can look at that and you can say, okay, maybe that couch is also like $50, you know, or maybe there's somebody else in the community that could definitely use this. And so you tend to hold on to things. And so this whole minimalism trend is like, it's by its nature kind of a little bit upper middle class. You know,
Right.
like at least in the way people are like, yeah, no, you just do this and do that. And then
Right.
I saw actually this great breakdown recently. It's like, well, no, this is a little bit of this is coming from a place of privilege, and here's why.
It's kind of like the people that tell you, oh, just quit your job, bro. You only live once. Just quit your job. And you're like, I mean, I get where you're coming from, and I totally understand that it would be freeing and liberating. But at the same time, I kind of have to worry about what I would do if shit didn't go well when you don't. You know, like if you were to just come back, you'd probably be taken care of. It could start off somewhere else just as easily. You know, it's kind of, you're right. In the place that it's coming from when people say that, you know, sort of like it becomes this thing of like, well, shit, like, you know, where are you coming from with that? Like, you know, like what are you privileged? Are you not privileged? I mean, and I have friends that do it that are taking a leap for sure. Like, you know, certain other friends that's kind of what they preach, but they really just happen to have made it for themselves. And I think that it's great in a way for teaching certain people that, you know, it's not about material things and it's not about this systematic way. So there's definitely good and bad to it, you know.
Yeah, and I think one of the documentaries, I think it's called like The Minimalist, right?
Yeah.
Which is on Netflix, which a lot of people have, I think, you know, kind of started this trend. It is very privileged. You know, it shows a lot of Caucasian males, one that's just like traveling the world and he's like, yeah, you know, I'm doing this, but it's like, that's such a privilege. Like someone from a Hispanic background, like I'm like, I would be never be able to do that. Not because maybe I couldn't afford it, but just because of the culture that, you know, we're not individualistic like often Americans are. You know, we're more of, you know, we're within a community, and if you're successful, then your community is successful. And so I don't think minimalism is for everyone, or nor do I think that I expect everyone to understand it, because I do think that there's a privilege with that.
Well, the question is, can it be? Yeah, like,
well,
I don't know.
This is my goal with that would be really educating low socioeconomic families about consuming better, you know, about telling them, hey, you know what, I know that maybe these sneakers are $10 and that's all you can do right now. But if maybe, you know, you can hold off for 2 more weeks and buy the $30 sneakers that are going to last 6 months, you know, so really teaching them it's the investment, not so much, because again, like we're so stuck on just buying what's quick, buying what's cheap, because that's what we can do. But that same mindset of consumerism has also kept us poor.
Well, yeah. I mean, so the general overall idea is that less is more in a lot of ways is good. You know, you don't need to have this many things, but is it practical for everybody? Not necessarily, you know, and like, you're right. You know, it just so happens to be that it's not one of the things that, statistically speaking, you see a lot of minority people doing. You know, you don't really have that kind of privilege.
Well, I think at the very least that I mean, actually, no, not at the very least, but you can, you know, take the ethical consumption, you know, part of that, you know, internally.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And you can use some of the things that you would learn from that. And I think what's that? There's like some kind of parable or something like that that's about the boots, like you know, the rich man buys the boots and they last him like 3 years. Poor man buys the boots for 100, but has to rebuy them 4 more times. You know, it's like shit, I'm trying to remember what the hell it was. Anyway, sorry. Yeah. That's not important.
No, I mean, the concept that you're talking about is
exactly,
that, you know, and often those who are more economically advantaged are able to truly make these investments, which makes it easier for them, which keeps them rich, which, you know, keeps them doing what they're doing. And it is much harder for someone with a low socioeconomic background. But I still find that maybe there could be a balance. And so even within myself, with this minimalism and, you know, with the new, with these mindsets that I'm having, you know, I think some people take it to the extreme, and I think that's great. But then I also just think that you have to find your own personal balance of what works within your home and what works for you.
Right. Well, and so to touch on another thing, not necessarily about like traveling and stuff, but when it comes to like materialism, name brands and stuff, I did happen to grow up with, and I'm not going to pretend like I'm not privileged myself. Like I'm definitely, like we were not super wealthy, but we were not ever having to worry about where we were going to get food, whether we were going to have clothes. Like, I've definitely been supported very well. So I'm kind of in the middle where like I can kind of get a little bit of both sides. And I had friends that always needed, because I liked nice things, but I wasn't like all about the top of the line like Jordans or the nicest shoes that came out, or having I couldn't even keep a watch for longer than a week, yet alone think about owning a Rolex. And I had friends that were just like so much about like, and I remember one of my friends, and I'm not going to say his name if he happens to listen, but he was just like, I was like, why? I was like, why do you care so much about that kind of stuff, dude? Why do you have to have it? He's like, dude, you don't understand what it's like to grow up poor. He's like, I have to have this stuff. I have to make it. I have to get rich. Like, that was his whole thing. I have to get rich because it sucks being that person that is poor when all of these other people are having these things. So it's definitely this like trying to catch up mentality with somebody else, like trying to have what other people have to make themselves feel like, and it goes along with the whole rap thing. I heard somebody say something very interesting about this magician guy that was like going on and saying all this stuff. He was like a street performer, but he was talking and getting real about how rappers, a lot of the times when they're over there flaunting about what they got, what they have, and all this stuff, it's not because they really care about those things. It's because they're trying to show you that to them, because they come from not having money, that money isn't a thing. Like, they'll throw away their money on this and that. I don't know how true that is for most of them, but I would say that that's a pretty, like, that sentiment all of a sudden became like, fuck, I guess that, like,
That's an interesting explanation. I feel like I would have heard that if that was explicitly like one of the points there. But I think to bring all this full circle, like a lot of these issues that we're talking about are like about a change of mindset and mentality, and like to have the kind of minimalist individualism, like that in itself is kind of a privilege. It's like, hey, you've always known and been shown how the world works and how to like get ahead and all this stuff, and literally that knowledge is not available to a lot of people in poor communities and stuff like that. And so that's why I think what you're doing actually like is great, because that's the most effective way is to just change, affect change generationally.
Yeah, and the hope would be is that if you feel really good about yourself, then you're not going to need those materialistic things. But I definitely understand that complex you just mentioned, because I grew up very poor, and just like I mentioned, I want to go into the fashion industry because it sounded so glamorous. And I mean, I still like see some designers and I'm like, oh my God, I always told my sister, when you make it rich, buy me a Chanel bag. That's all I want. And, I still say that now, but now that I think about it, I'm like, really, I don't think I'd feel comfortable carrying like a $3,000 bag, knowing that, kids are hungry or something.
Well, especially because you could probably find stuff that looks way cooler that's not designer at all, like from a thrift store. At least that's what I've found in my older age.
Yeah. But again, it's that complex that you talked about.
Yeah.
It's like I grew up so poor that my passion and dedication has always been like, I'm going to be successful. I never really knew what I was going to do or what, but that has always been my thing. I'm going to be successful so that I can have enough money to be able to provide and take care of my family. And so now that I, have reached a level of success, I'm able to kind of change that mentality. But again, I speak in a very privileged way because now I'm sitting with the profession, a master's degree, and now I'm preaching this. But at the moment, like back in the day, when I didn't have these mentalities, I was totally falling into the materialistic stuff to make myself feel better or feel like, I'm doing something right. Mm-hmm. And so my hope would be that if, you can develop your self-esteem and who you are, then, if you want to buy those things because they truly make you happy, then go for it. But if you're buying them for others or for your look or to fill the void that, I don't know, that you're missing, then maybe that's another choice you need to make.
Right. So now off topic from what we were just talking about, but back to, the students and how you noticed that there was a kid that, kind of needed more guidance, more help in the way of how to, socialize and how to learn. And so I grew up, my brother, and understood a little bit about like the special needs community. And so back then there was so much less offered to, anybody who had disabilities. In fact, like when my brother was younger, it was kind of like they lumped them all together into one classroom in each district, where it was just like the range of all of their disabilities was so, and then in high school, like it was either you go to the one school that in each district that's where they all go, like, and then everything else at a school is just ELD. English disability. Like it's
English learners.
English learners. So they're not, they don't understand that. So that was kind of the distinction. So, but in the regular population of people that don't technically, and I mean, we've seen since they've developed all of these different programs for these people that it's really hard to classify people into any specific
I feel like
specific
everything's
disability.
a spectrum.
So and that goes along with even in the people that don't necessarily have disabilities or trouble learning things, but like just in the way of like feeling good about themselves, like because of their families and the way that they're brought up and what they're taught by their families. Like it has nothing to do with the fact that they're capable of learning math or any of the subjects. It's more like in the way of like, well, this person just doesn't get along with people, he doesn't know how to do that. So like what do you think, like is the cause of that for the most part with kids like that?
Like what causes
like that they're kind of like like they just go through, like, is it just vary all across the board, or what statistically is kind of the thing that puts them into this social awkwardness or this way where they just can't really relate to people and they can't really get down to it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, special ed is not my specialty, and I don't know much. I will say that I feel things have gotten better. We have really passionate special ed teachers that are fighting for their students to be in a classroom and less segregated, and really providing them that those additional resources so that they can still be in a classroom with your general ed population. But as far as like these, social emotional, gaps, you would say, I think that there's a lot, and there's not one thing, because anything can traumatize a child. And, we now have but, we have autism, which April is Autism Awareness Month. And so that's one thing that every year, there's more research and we find out more information, but yet there's still a lot of things that are unanswered that we really don't know as to what is the cause. And so, but at least for me, like what I would like to get caught up in is, what can we do? Like, okay, so obviously you're here, this is what you're lacking. How can we build those skills? And so I don't know, there's a lot. There's the intellectual disabilities, there's trauma, there's like growing up in a low socioeconomic community. Obviously, you hear these success stories, and that's amazing, but then there's behind that one success story, there's a couple kids that maybe just didn't get there, or didn't have the right mindset in a sense to be like, I can get out of this, and just, stayed within that community and fell into whatever the community was doing and just kind of kept the cycle going. So like that kind of brings it full circle to, again, that mental health is, how do you break these cycles in families for students to experience less trauma, experience less gaps in the education, less gaps in resources. And so, the key would be kind of providing that, mental health awareness and education.
Well, and just being there for them, because you can never completely prevent it. You can just keep on working to try to like fix it from here.
The sky's the limit as for what can cause some of these issues. And, a lot of the times tragically, it's completely out of these kids' control.
Definitely.
Stuff just happens to them, And I think, I guess I tie it back to, have you guys ever seen The Wire? I consider it the greatest show of all time. And the greatest season of all time follows like a group of kids when they're like growing up in, the rough part of Baltimore. But, they're all innocent, happy, hanging out and stuff like that. And over the rest of the show, you kind of see what happens to them. And you see them slowly like lose their innocence event by event. Yeah. And almost all of it is completely out of their control. Stuff just happens, or they trust somebody who was supposed to help them, like a social worker or something like that.
Yeah.
And something with the system ends up going. So it's like they wanted to help, and then the system cut them off, and then that just ruined their life. And you see the whole cycle start over again. And it really is heartbreaking. It's something that I wish more people would understand.
Watch like shows like Shameless though, like, because then it becomes like so shameless, and then you're just like, this sucks, because these kids are like learning how to become like terrible people, but it's not their fault. Like, you know, like they're not terrible, but like they're just doing terrible things, and there's like nothing they can do about it. Like they're like destined for this kind of nonsense. It's like really who like it's just a matter of luck as to who could actually get out of that, you know? Because it's really weird how it's all across the board. But I can't watch it because I just feel too like, oh man, like I feel bad for these kids.
It's so frustrating to me how, you know, so many people are like, well, you know, why don't they just, you know, like stay in school and like, you know, work harder than apply for the FAFSA. It's like, dude, okay, your experience is not typical over there. You can't even begin to fathom what these kids are going through. So how dare you say like, why don't they just do this? Like, no, we need to be helping them and, you know, doing this because it's cultural.
Yeah.
It's deep in there.
Here's why that whole system, at least when I went to school, fucking sucked because like I was somewhere teetering on the line of not being like I said, we weren't rich or anything, but we just had went over the point of not being able to get financial aid from the schools. And so like here I was, you know, having to pay like my parents, you know, supporting me through going to college and stuff like that, but like limited in a lot of ways, where then I had all these other friends that were going and they were just like totally not using that money that they were getting for school, and they were like doing other things with it. But I was just like, what the fuck? Like the system itself, I don't know how much it's gotten better since then. Has it? Do you guys have any?
I mean, I don't know if it's gotten better. I definitely think FAFSA, Michelle Obama, you know, has a really great campaign, and you know, it's Reach Higher, and it's all about you know, that college awareness piece and getting, you know, more students into college. And I feel like FAFSA's, I mean, it's like a, you know, it's a government program that you qualify or you don't qualify. And then the hope would be that if you qualify and you have that opportunity, is that you take that opportunity. You know, we can't control people's choices. And I think that's, again, why I bring it back to this growth mindset, is because it's a choice that you have to make every single day. And it's really hard to almost be like a, you know, like a awake individual, because you almost have to try so much harder than if you're just like ignorant. You know, that comment, like, or that statement, ignorance is bliss. Sometimes it is, because once you know about something, it's hard to shut it off and just kind of live as if you don't know it. But with that growth mindset, you know, what I love about it is that it doesn't matter what socioeconomic status you are, what gender, what community you come from. It's about your thoughts and how you decide to want to live your life. Like, your life may still suck, but you can reframe those thoughts into something a little bit more positive just to get you to the next step. Mm-hmm. Once you get to that next step, and, you know, maybe you fail again, then maybe you reframe your thoughts to continue until hopefully, you know, you get to a place where you are being successful. Right. And whatever success means, you know, to that person, because it means a lot of things. And so,
well, it goes like with this quote, that I had on this like business card right above my desk, which has been phrased in many different ways, but it's basically like life is 10% of what happens to you and 90% of how you choose to react to it.
Yes, I love
and that's
that
like the simplest way to put it, because it is a choice. Like I tell people all the time when people read away, and not related to school or anything like that, but when it comes to being optimistic, because I get accused all the time, well, you're just overly optimistic, you're not looking at the problem. It's like, no, it's not about what's happening, what the problem is, but it's like, you know, if you could sit down and think about it for a second, you can control how you move forward from that situation. Yes. And the mindset, and then when you start to notice like the energy and your, you know, like when you start to have better thoughts about things and have a better outlook on the shitty situation that you're about to get into, things start to just naturally go better than if you're just like it's like working in a restaurant. We were like, when you're in the weeds and you're just like, you could either just kind of like laugh and say, you know what, fucking, we're gonna get through this, we're gonna be out of here in a few hours, or you could be like, oh fuck, I'm drowning in the weeds, and you're just like, I fucking hate this table, and the next thing you know, you got a shittier tip, or somebody says one thing, and you're like I'm about to explode on somebody.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it's really, it's like, so it's simple but yet so complex. And so I mentioned that today I presented on growth mindset to teachers, and you know, some.
Well, can I stop you for a second?
Yeah.
Can we you know, define that a little more, because I'm sure
mindset?
I think we talked about it a little bit at the top, but like can you pitch us kind of
so I mean, I'll kind of start from where I even learned about it. So I got into a phase of really like loving and listening to educational TED Talks, because again, I was trying to kind of figure out, am I doing the teacher thing? Am I going to become a social worker? What's going on? And so again, like I said, I've always wanted to be successful, and I had that in my mind, and so I ran into this TED Talk about like what makes people successful. And even through the end of my undergraduate degree, a lot of what we were researching was how psychology was taking a turn for more of the positive. For so long, psychologists studied what makes people like crazy or what's wrong with people, where, this new era came of like, well, what is working and how can we take maybe like a recipe and create more successful people? And so I ran into the TED Talk by Angela Lee Duckworth, and it was on grit. And so she talked about how, I forgot what her first job was, but she went into teaching, and she realized that, there was very intelligent students. There was kind of like the middle students and the low students. And she noticed that even the most intelligent students sometimes just kind of lack the drive to be successful. Like they had everything there to be the best student, but were kind of lazy about it. And yet, maybe you had that low student or the middle student who had more of that grit. And so she describes grit as the passion and determination to, reach your goal. And so that really sparked her interest. She started researching different careers and different people in success, and even started to observe, like she said she went into certain jobs and she would observe people kind of by their work ethic, not so much their intelligence, and she started to be able to pinpoint like who was going to quit and who was going to like stay for the long run. And so she ended up finding that grit is that one thing in successful people. It's that passion and that determination to kind of keep going. And so within her video, she talks about, so how do we create grit, right? Because now everybody wants grit. And how do we get passion and determination in students? And so she's like, we don't know. Research is not out yet. We really, we can't figure it out. She's like, but there is this concept of growth mindset. And so growth mindset is the, it's an idea that you have of yourself. And we have different mindsets for maybe how you play a sport and maybe who you are as an artist or a teacher or even a daughter or a son. We all have these like ideas of who we are. And so she talked about how this growth mindset is just reframing our almost negative ideas of who we are and creating more of this growth mindset. And so there's a fixed mindset of like, I suck at math. That's fixed mindset. You're pretty much letting that be it. And then there's that growth mindset of, what am I missing? Like, am I maybe lacking in multiplication? And if I practice multiplication, am I now good at math? And so that's kind of where the whole growth mindset was brought up for me. And then just throughout my own education, Carol Dweck is the psychologist that really had this whole research when she came out with a book. And so yeah, growth mindset is the idea of being able to always improve, being that lifelong learner. Mm-hmm. And if you have that mindset, then there's really nothing stopping you. Not even a failure, because you're like almost willing to fail because you understand that that's okay and that you're still going to learn something.
Mm-hmm. Well, okay, so now going back to this, I was a kid that always wanted to try different things growing up, but then I was kind of in a way discouraged from it, because people, I think back then, and especially because when you graduated from high school, not really knowing if you were going to go to college, I kind of was like, well, I'm going to go to just junior college, but I wasn't, like the kids that were in my honors classes that like by the time they were sophomores already knew where they were going to go and had all that, like, the idea that they could pick something that young before they even developed into like, who they were as adults or whatever, figuring out what they wanted to do. Do you think that that's like a good or a bad thing to get somebody on a track to one single thing? Or should you try to get them to experience and try out so many different things just to see,
She's her own best example right there.
Right.
Yeah. I think, again, we have to be aware of just people's own personal risk factors, but I feel like education is really changing. It's not that concept of sit down, be quiet, and, fill out this worksheet and regurgitate whatever you're reading from the book. Like, education is really taking a turn because really the only thing between a teacher and Google is basically the connection, those relationships, that person that's going to motivate you to keep going. And so education has really taken a turn for the positive where, kids are being more exploratory. We're asking them to be more critical thinkers and problem solvers because the way our world's going, like we need these young children to pretty much fix a lot of the mistakes that we've made. And so yes, I mean, I think there's that healthy balance or there needs to be a healthy balance of risk taking and, still being aware of what you're doing. I wouldn't go and say, oh, let your kid do absolutely everything so that they can, because again, that could be detrimental and may, cause trauma, which then may stop them from even trying anything again. You really have to be
Case by case.
Yeah, case by case and truly understand the child and what the child is almost asking of, for yourself. I mean, I didn't know you as a child, but if you were that kid that, was constantly exploring and wanted to like touch things and figure things out, if that's something that was like innate in you as a parent, like, why should I take that away from you? Obviously as a parent, I'm there to create some boundaries for you to keep you safe and, provide that guidance.
Well, I think that the boundaries for myself were actually kind of a good thing, even though, because I think that my natural rebellious nature is kind of to go and do that anyways. And at least they had like instilled some sort of foundation where like, if I were to just have gone off and done whatever I want, you're right. I probably could have just like on my own thought I was going to be a failure. But the fact that somebody was telling me like, no, you got to do this and this and that. And like me wanting to try more, it gave me that grit. That was like the way I got that grit, like that was like my way of like saying like, hey, like this is what I want to do. What do you think though about like standardized testing as a way to go about trying to see whether somebody's qualified to do anything? I always had a problem with that because some people just aren't good at fucking taking tests the same way that other people are, like sitting down and taking these SATs and shit like that that a lot of kids cheat on, or that they study enough just to regurgitate and like just get a good score and then not really retain and learn the information.
Yeah. And so, that's kind of changing. I think obviously education is on a path of having this growth mindset, right? Of figuring out ways of testing all students where it's not, where maybe a Caucasian student may answer a question correctly, but because based on their experiences compared to maybe a African American student who hasn't experienced it, and not because they're not intelligent, it's just they didn't have that opportunity. And so I definitely think that that has been a topic for a while about making standardized testing more equitable for all students. And so
so then how do you split it up at that point though? Is it based on race or economical position? Because I mean now there's can be I think at a certain point it doesn't necessarily matter about the color of your skin as much as about like what class of society you belong to.
Well, if I can interject for a second here, like do you know the name of that very famous psychological experiment that they did where they had people take tests and they showed what was it? I think they primed everybody ahead of time for like some kind of standardized test, and they go like, okay, yeah, well, women don't tend to be as don't tend to do as well in this one, but good job, like you guys can do this,
Yeah.
And then there was a direct correlation there between like lower scores and that little primer, and I think there was also something. I think they did another similar thing with black people versus white people, or black people versus just other.
Yeah.
And they saw a direct correlation between their mentality going into the test and what they could do there. And then they had, I think part of that experiment was also, they said at the beginning, like, okay, this test is kind of weird. It's arranged in a unique way that like doesn't really benefit anybody or something to that effect. And everybody, totally evened out. So it's not that they're smarter, but it is about the mentality that goes into it, right?
And I love that you mentioned that because that's kind of the trickiness of growth mindset. And, part of my presentation today to the teachers was, Carol Dweck going back to her initial research and really reflecting on, what she came out. So when she came out with this growth mindset, people loved the idea, ran with it, but now she's reflecting on, is it being facilitated intentionally and actually giving? So growth mindset is, yes, it's motivational, reframing your thoughts, but it's truly to create true learning experiences, not this false sense of self-esteem. Because studies like the ones that you mentioned have been done in, for several different examples, and they've shown that when you almost when you're constantly telling a kid like, you're so smart, and the kid ends up having like this inflated self-esteem, that eventually they want to take less risk because you've put them on a pedestal. You've said you're so smart that they don't want to risk losing that title. But yet the studies where you have instead of saying you're so smart and you're praising the student on their effort and how hard they're working, the kids are more likely to continue to work hard, because again, they're not having that inflated self-esteem that you just created for another child. And so, growth mindset talks on appropriate praise. And that's one of the big things I'm creating, like take-home notes for teachers that eventually I'd like to put on the Teachers Pay Teachers website, where it's very intentional praise, because good job eventually becomes just a very blanket statement. And because, again, kids sometimes are very literal or don't really understand, like as adults, we understand what we're praising. Maybe it could be that they're sitting down quietly or whatever. But when you just say good job, eventually they're like, okay, thanks, but they don't know what you're saying good job for. And so growth mindset is really about being intentional in your praise. And so again, if you want your child to say quietly more often, then praise that behavior versus, oh my God, you're so crazy, you're running around, just saying, oh my God, thank you for sitting so quietly, and even praising those small successes. And so I started off the year. So I work at a middle school, and I'm in charge of the student service center. So I often get the students that get kicked out of class, that have a lot of behavior issues. And so with children that experience these behavior issues, a lot of times they do have trauma. And, I've learned that when you approach them in like a very hostile way, their defense mechanisms go up. They don't want to work for you. They don't want to listen to you. And so you really have to, nurture that relationship, but in a positive way. And so at the beginning of the year, I started doing grade checks for my students. And so a lot of them have D's or F's, but the positive way that I would get to encourage them to raise their grades is I'd say, hey, you went from a 68% to a 70%, which for most maybe teachers or anybody, that's like, oh, great, you went from a D to a C, like no big deal. But yet, it's giving them that positive.
Yeah, you gotta like praise the short victories.
Yeah. And so I was actually telling a teacher about that today. I'm like, the other day a student came in, he's like, oh, I want to check my grades. And so I go and I'm like, hey, you know what? You still have a D. Like, what's going on? And so he's like, yeah, he's like, but Mrs., he's like, but I went from blah, blah, I went up 4%. And so that made me kind of stop in my tracks, where I'm like, oh my God, I've like planted these seeds of almost like growth mindset of watching those little successes. And I forgot about it because, yeah, when you're at school and so much is going on, it's hard to be intentional all the time and positive because you're worn out.
You're a human being.
Yeah, definitely. And so, when the student told me that, I'm like, you know what? You're right. And I give them candy even though I'm not supposed to. And so
really?
I gave them, with all, different regulations with sugar and things like that. You're not supposed to give kids an overabundance of sugar. So, I'm like, yeah, you know what? You're so right. Like, here's your candy. And those little, that little conversation reminded me of like, oh my God, they listen. And like this one kid who, yes, even though he continues to get D's and F's, at least he's like seeing his small successes and is continuing to try. And so
sounds like he almost gave you the same thing you were giving him.
Yeah, that's what I love about my job. Like, I don't know, obviously you can't see it, but that stuff like makes me light up, because that's when you see that mindset changing, or like that's what truly makes education
we could definitely
the
see
magic.
it. We could definitely see that the way that you're talking about it here. You're definitely passionate about what you're doing.
That last little bit just blew my mind for like 4 different reasons over there. But you just said so much stuff that made a lot of sense right there. Giving kids that incremental victory and not rewarding them on being smart or something that can be, seem passive or something like that, but rewarding them on the effort and using that as the metric to like keep them going. That's a pretty fascinating insight. And so in dealing with these kids, like, what, I guess, do you, okay, if you could like snap your fingers and make sweeping changes to like the way education works, from, where you are like in a middle school, and if you have any better ideas, like what does that look like?
Definitely school is a good place to have that. But I definitely think it needs to start even before middle school, so if we had more counselors at the elementary level, like that would make kids more successful into middle school. And if you're more successful in middle school, then you're more successful in high school. So it's really starting very young, almost to, birth. Like when mothers and fathers are, getting pregnant, like starting that education there, really showing parents how their actions or their behaviors or even the way that they speak to their children can cause these like long lasting effects. I think that's really key. Like if I could snap my fingers, and I know this maybe sounds like super controlling, it'd be that everybody who gets pregnant or is going to have a child needs to go through a certain number of courses, like bare basics of not just so much the care of the child of like how to put on a diaper, but the care of their brain and just how to nurture that, like the most important organ in our bodies, right? And so I think that is key. If we teach parents how to foster appropriate growth and be more, I guess, healthier, then that's going to provide healthier students.
Just overall healthier living and choices.
Yeah.
It kind of seems to me like, the role of a counselor, like we should just have more counselors too.
Yes.
Like we should have almost a counselor for every teacher so that these kids can, like somebody that specializes in development, who can really understand these kids on a psychological level that, if you're a math teacher or an art teacher, you probably don't have that area of expertise, but having somebody who can really reach, a lot of the kids who are struggling or who could be better, to be able to translate a lot of this literal material, this classic math, science stuff, and put it to them, or at least teach them how to learn. That seems like a...
Yeah, and I think, I don't think that no teacher has like child development experience. A lot of teachers do, especially if they go through the program. But again, it's kind of, if their passion is math, that's where they're going to seek a lot of their own education. Whereas, my passion is psychology and mental health. So that, I seek that education. And so I just think, more counselors would be helpful. In California, one counselor to student ratio should be 1 to 250. Whereas currently at my school, we're lucky to have 2 counselors because my principal is, he really believes in giving resources for kids and finds the importance in mental health. So he was able to hire me on additional funds, but it's 2 counselors for 750 students. And so even though there's 2 counselors, like that's still a lot. I don't get to often see my kids who may have suicidal ideation, or my kids that have anxiety, because oftentimes the kids with the really like crazy behaviors in class that are getting kicked out are taking a lot of my attention. So yes, there's kids that, fall through the gaps because we don't have enough manpower to address a lot of issues that are going on.
Is that a somewhat common thing at that age group, like middle age, is a suicidal, is that a problem you ever had to deal with personally?
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Really? Okay.
In my first year as a counselor intern in South El Monte, I went as far as hospitalizing a 4th grader. And so when I say that, a lot of people are surprised. They're like, a 4th grader, really? Jesus. But this 4th grader had gone through so much trauma as watching her father get deported and, just living in a gang environment. Like this child wasn't in 4th grade. Like she understood so much more. And, finally she just broke down and was like, I don't want to live. Like what?
It's just so much work and scary and it's fucking tiring.
And you're so, as an adult, when these things happen to us, we feel so alone, and it takes us a while to get back up and, figure it out. And we have the resources or whatever, but imagine a child who doesn't even know what's really going on, but can feel something is not right. And so yeah,
with nobody there to really like, you know, console her or make her feel, or them, you know, feel like that, you know, it's gonna be all okay. Like that's gotta be, yeah,
And
that
you
is
know what?
shocking though. Fourth grade, that's really shocking, but it makes sense. You
Yeah,
know?
it does. And then, you know, I have other students where, you know, now they're at the middle school level, but, you know, they thought of it as even early, like a lot of students that are, you know, that having came out as gay or lesbian, or, you know, are still figuring out where they fall under the spectrum of sexuality. You know, oftentimes these students can't express how they feel. They can't say who they love. And so eventually all that like hidden emotion, you know, you're just like, well, why am I here? Right. And so, but yeah, I don't know. I know that there's certain schools that have more of this issue. As far as our school, we've had a few each year, not that actually like commit suicide, but yeah, there's a lot of, you know, there could be a lot of that that talk, and even those thoughts of, you know, why am I here? Would it just be easier if I committed suicide? And so yeah.
That is rough, you know, and that
That alone's a reason enough to have more people like you doing.
Well, I mean,
what
that's
you're
why,
doing.
you know, it makes me so irate when people, you know, when people are against things like DACA, and people are all for ICE coming and just ripping families apart out here. It's like there's
some people are for it. Unfortunately, it's really weird to think that like that people are all for it. You know, it's
oh
crazy.
yeah, people are cheering as, you know, kids are left without, you know, without their parents, are left completely alone. I mean, I was following up with this story about this
crazy.
I think it was this Haitian little girl who was like 7 was stuck in an ICE like containment holding cell for like 9 months or something like that. You know, separated from her mother.
Plenty of of kids that are still being held.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's inhumane and fucking un-American, you know? And this is, I mean, it's so damaging to these kids at an early level when they are so receptive too. And when you look at the ones who have not had to go through that, there's plenty of, I mean, I'm friends with a lot of kids who came here, you know, when they were really, really little, you know, that's not their home country. And they are some of the most successful, driven, like, productive members of society.
I think that's kind of the truth though with immigrants. You know, they come here with the dream, you know, and they want to like
With that grit.
They
That grit,
have
you know?
the
Well,
grit.
because
They
I
have the
think
passion
Which
and
I'm going to be
determination.
I'm
Yeah.
working that into every like other sentence now. I
Do
love
it.
that phrase
Do it.
so much.
Do it.
they're coming here with the sense of like, you know, this is what I came here for, to do what I gotta do, like live the American dream that all these other spoiled motherfuckers are kind of like forgetting about. And,
Exactly.
you know, and that's kind of what you see is like they're coming over here, they're like, oh, this isn't a problem, I got this opportunity still. So it's like that positive mindset to do it. And I mean, you're right, like it's they're coming over here and actually being successful, while there's so many other people that just like take for granted where we were born and what we were born into. And so it's just fucked up to see that it's more about where you were born instead of like what you're actually doing or providing or you know striving for, that people are judging anything off of. And that the fact that you're right, anybody that would take anybody away from their family is just like the most ridiculous thing in the fucking
brutal,
world.
man.
Like,
But to you know, shift topics, and you know, we're going to kind of be wrapping up here because we're kind of getting running up against the clock. I want to know how your you know, can you explain a little bit more kind of what you're doing on the pay teachers thing, and can you talk more about oh man, now I got my notes all mixed up, which usually happens by the end of the show. But talk about more about what you're doing online to like provide more resources and empower other teachers to use what you've learned.
You know, so as far as like a month ago, and again, you know, I'm going through this growth mindset where I'm super passionate about this, and I kind of fall under the assumption that anybody who hears it is going to buy into it right away and believes it. And, you know, I've been mentioning to a couple people, and those who I've mentioned it to, it's almost like a blank stare, like, what are you talking about? And so I've really had to evaluate exactly what I'm going to do and how I'm going to do it. And I think I have an idea, but I'm not sure yet. I mean, obviously it needs to start with just creating awareness of what it is so people know what it is. And then they have that option of whether they want to buy into it or not. And then, once that buy-in is there, then being able to provide just really, simple strategies for teachers or, counselors to just be able to implement it in their own way. Because I don't want to add more to a teacher that we already ask of them to do. But if that's something that they're passionate about and that they can live it, and it's not just talking it, because that's another thing Carol Dweck talks about is just, she created this whole growth mindset, but she's scared that people are implementing it the wrong way without the true passion, without like the
Passion
true
misplaced.
genuine, being genuine about it. A teacher can say all the most positive things in the world, but if a kid still feels like they don't like them or that they're not genuine, like, kids are so smart. They feed it, they read that stuff. And so, she talks about being able to walk that talk in a sense. And so it's, as I said, I've really had to evaluate how I'm going to go about it because I don't, I have to just kind of just spread awareness, let the universe
let it organically grow into the thing, create this resurgence in passion for what you're doing. Because from my, observation from everybody that I know is a teacher, like they start off with, a strong passion for it. And then, I think that like working in a system that they kind of really can't get their ideal ways of teaching out there because of standardized testing and like limitations and budget cuts and all these sort of things kind of wear you down, and it takes away from the morale of it. So if you really get people really focused and show them that, focus your passions on the solutions rather than the problems too, then I think that will definitely for sure guide a lot of people into, and I think, because I'm only saying this confidently because I think that's kind of what this is what happens in everything. In
there's
just about
burnout
anything.
Well, I've been a big proponent of, of having education go out to people who really want to seek it themselves, because there are so many great resources online to learn stuff that we don't necessarily have to put it into, our classic education system where it just comes from the teachers. It's just, there are books that are given to you that you're teaching from these 4 or 5 publishing companies who, I've seen some reports.
Monopoly.
Okay. Yeah, look at your face. I wanted to gauge before I started like going off on any like too crazy conspiracy theory, but they are, they're slightly biased, based on.
It's not a conspiracy theory. It's pretty much it's there.
I didn't want to speak out of turn if I was wrong about that, but yeah, it's kind of fucked up what I've seen how. Course curriculums get nationalized, and
a lot of history doesn't get included.
Yeah,
and it sucks. Yeah. It sucks for a lot of minorities because really they're the ones that are missing out on their history. For Hispanics, when they're learning about America, they probably get a very small glimpse of like the small war that was between America and Mexico, and that's it. They get like a paragraph, whereas they go years and years about learning the American culture, which that's great. I'm not saying we shouldn't, but I definitely think with our diverse cultures that maybe kids would be more engaged if they're learning and they're reading about people who look like them, that come from their origin. And there's something that
you think we should probably give them the choice at a younger age, like before college, like, to be able to offer different classes? Or would that be too hard for them to do nationwide in each school because of budgets and stuff?
Well, I think you're probably hitting on what I've thought was the solution for a long time, which is having independent teachers and educators and people who have this genuine passion for it. This kind of mixing of government and free market ideas, and so you have all these resources that you're using to empower teachers to apply some of these core principles in their own classroom, and it gets to kind of funnel out that way, and you're expanding on. You're still hitting all. I don't know how education.
Well, honestly, don't give me that much credit because I'm not a history teacher, so I don't know much about it. But just kind of from what I see on social media, like there are schools that are trying to incorporate like African American studies and Chicano studies, where often you don't get that option until you get to college. So being able to provide that even at the high school level, like that's so like modern and moving forward. And my hope. And I know we're going to get there in education. It just might take us a little while. We might have to, do some fighting. But I truly do feel that education is growing and people are becoming more awake, and they're starting to realize a lot more that, we have a lot more power than we think we do. Just like, going back to our consumerism, if you want McDonald's to have healthier food, then stop buying their unhealthy food and start requesting healthy food. And eventually they have to listen to us. We're the ones buying and consuming their food. And so, I really do think that with, this kind of Trump era and people waking up and being a little bit more,
The preferred nomenclature is woke.
I understand.
Just kidding.
Woke. No, I always kept saying woke, and I was like, there needs to be another word for it because
Just
what
it would derive from, awake.
Awake, yeah.
A little more sensible word than.
I forgot where I heard it, but they said awake. I'm like, there it is. That's what I'm gonna say because I can say woke to the kids, and I guess they still find me semi cool because I'm not too old, but. Yeah, when I'm speaking to adults, I do want to sound knowledgeable on what I'm talking about. So I'm like, let's find a better word than woke. So
that's actually probably a good idea because a lot of these words get, they get co-opted and they get turned into dirty words from the other side over there.
Oh my God.
When there were so many things that didn't, that were totally fine, but now it's like, oh, woke, and then people just immediately there's all these connotations that are starting to come with a lot of the slang.
Yeah,
that's going
it's
back
even
and
a
forth,
joke. It's like a parody. Like even amongst the people who claim or consider themselves, or at least feel that that they are woke. And especially like with all of our friends, like it's just kind of a thing that's thrown around out there. Like, oh, I'm woke, or they're woke.
Okay,
woke,
I use
woke
it
AF.
totally unironically now, though. I like it. I like using that language to to bring about these very kind of complex and these very beautiful ideas that I'm so glad that they're mainstream, even if they do have some silly wording behind them. I'm like, no, this is a great concept though, being culturally aware.
Way to have growth mindset. I was just gonna say, like, maybe some people are butchering the word or whatever, but hey, at least that word is out there. People are using it. True. Like that's a positive. Like let's keep the momentum.
Talk about it.
Let's talk about
Getting
it.
Getting woke is a good thing. So go ahead.
It depends on how you look at things. I always say, there's always a different way to look at something, and that's like one of the things that I've had to learn on my own in life, and it's a choice more often than not how to look at it. And so a lot of people choose to look at the glass as half empty. You could choose to look at it as half full. And one of the things I'm getting from this is that you're very passionate about this because you see that it is getting better and that it can be even better and that, you're going to get there. But you're also, understanding that people have to praise those small victories and keep going for it. Like a lot of people would even myself, I'd be like, wow, the education system's kind of fucked. All this standardized testing, all this stuff. That was somebody who doesn't know. So I've been educated this time around by listening to you and getting a different outlook on how it is going. So
growing mindset.
And hopefully everybody else that's listening kind of,
I feel much better about education after having talked to you, somebody who's like deep in it, than I did an hour ago. So
that's awesome. And again, I don't want to claim that I'm an expert, but I'm very hopeful that there's very passionate people out there that feel just like I do. And those small victories they're doing, whether it's through Instagram or creating these communities within teachers, like that's powerful and that's really creating change. So I think that's awesome.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. So, how can people help somebody who isn't in education? Is there something that you think if somebody can do? Like, is there, something they can donate to maybe, or a cause, or, what's an everyday way?
You know what? I honestly think it's, supporting your teachers, supporting your education really, because those are the ones that are really fostering these minds, right? We're creating the millionaires and the CEOs, but yet no one shout outs their teacher at the end of the day.
Get more involved with your kids' lives too. Don't just say, oh crap, I got a student teacher meeting that I have to go to.
That, and don't put all the responsibility on education and teachers, because although teachers see kids sometimes a lot longer more hours than a parent does, a lot of the foundation of education comes from the home. And so teaching your child values and reading to them and, not shaming them for their mistakes, but teaching them that, hey, you know what, you made a mistake or this happened. So how are we going to do it? And holding them accountable and making them problem solvers, really, because we are in an era where things are very accessible for most kids, and with better socioeconomic status and more people going to college, and for those that maybe grew up poor, their initial instinct is to give their kids everything they didn't get because they know how it felt. But really teaching kids the morals of like what hard work is and effort and being kind and being a good
values,
neighbor.
yeah.
Yeah, it's all about those values that sometimes, we forget about.
I
But
think
it
as
starts in
adults,
the home.
I
It
think as
starts in the
adults, we
home.
all need that too. We all
yeah.
need to reevaluate.
Everything that we've said today can totally apply to adults.
Yes.
And I'm like, I'm taking some of this and internalizing it for me myself.
Yeah.
Never stop. Never think that you're too old. Because I've been saying it for a while now that I think that all adults are just overgrown children too. I mean, like, what do we have to compare to what? We're just like we're still growing. And then it's when people feel that they've come to a point where they can't learn anything more. That's what becomes problematic, because then that's what creates these like walls that people that are trying to move forward with things can't get over.
Yeah.
And so
But,
learn from
yeah.
the kids. Learn.
So how can people get in touch with you and the work that you're doing?
Well, I mean, I think for starters, follow me on Blooming Mindsets on Instagram. I do have that YouTube channel, but it is in its standstill. I'm still trying to figure out what kind of YouTube videos or messages do I eventually want to create or, propose. And just, at the moment, there's no limit. I feel like there's 1,000 things that I can do, and I'm still trying to organize it in a way that's going to not just make sense for myself, because obviously I'm still a counselor by day, but being able to do something that's going to be powerful and meaningful to the world.
Well, what I do when I'm not doing this is actually helping people, small businesses and stuff like that, facilitate a lot of what you're talking about.
Nice.
So, hey, if I'm completely sold on Blooming Mindsets right now. So if
awesome.
you ever need some help, I can at least give you some guidance on how to go about accomplishing a lot of these things that you're talking about.
Very
Because I'm
cool.
like, oh no, you already have all the elements that are there in order to actually successfully do this thing.
Yeah, you know what? I have to actually practice what I preach, and I have to walk myself through this, because I'm really just throwing myself out there into something I absolutely do not know about. I mean, not that I don't know about growth mindset, but just the business aspect and taking those risks and financial risk, that's very scary. And so I have to literally every single day, right when I registered Blooming Mindsets as an LLC, I was sick to my stomach for a week. I couldn't, I was just in a shock of so much anxiety that I was like, what did I just do? And so I, as an adult, as a person who preaches growing, blooming, like a blooming and a growth mindset, I have to continue to think of this as something that's going to grow and be successful. I just don't know how I'm going to get there yet, but it's going to happen.
Oh, that's awesome. So, all right. So everybody keep an eye out for Blooming Mindsets. And we'll throw a link up to the Instagram in the show notes of this one.
Awesome.
And I think we are going to be wrapping it up here, you guys. So,
Thanks,
of
guys.
course, everybody who's listened so far, please, 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 please do us a quick favor and subscribe to us on iTunes or Stitcher or Google Play. We are syndicated all over the place now.
Yep.
So
Let It Bleed Cast. Check us out.
Let It
Phil,
Bleed
where can they
Cast.
find you personally?
Oh, me personally, that would be at Nobody Cares Phil on Instagram and at Phil Nobody Cares on Twitter. And I too have lately been going through a lot of these, personal growth crises. These, oh God, I feel sick to my stomach. I don't know exactly how to move forward and do my thing. But hey, my new website's up at nobodycaresphil.com, and that's going to continuously evolve over time as I try to embark on my own journey.
Check it
of
out.
educating
Send
the
him emails.
masses.
Tell him that you want to go watch him do comedy, because we all want to see him do comedy.
Yeah,
We wanna
we'll
check it
get
out.
around to that.
Yeah.
And my man, last but not least.
Well, Hood Rat Stuff with 3 F's for my personal, but be sure to follow the art account I run. It's Psychedelic Lions Den, psychedelic_lions_den, if you want to check out some of the local artists that I get the pleasure of working with, and just to, get some eye candy for the day. And yeah.
Not to mention we've got Art in the Park numero 6
Yes, we
coming
do.
up on the 15th, and I
Yes.
think we're still waiting on a couple details to confirm, right? But this
I
is
think we
this is an
can-
ambitious one.
Yeah, it's
Are we
going
doing
to
the
be a really
mannequins?
big one. We're doing mannequins.
We are doing the mannequins.
I
That's
decided
official?
we're doing the mannequin challenge.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're going to do mannequins, and we've got a lot of stuff because we're teaming up with the RGL collective, the Regal Collective. So we are doing that, and it's going to be really big, and it's April 15th. family-friendly event. Please bring everybody out. This kind of goes along with building a community of, positive thinkers, because what it is people coming together and just, making themselves believe that they can do something that they probably didn't think that they could do before, because they're just doing it with other people that are good. It's everybody's equal there. We're all teaching each other some things, and we can hopefully all take something away from it. Just like I hope you have all taken something away from this. I certainly have.
To wrap that into the theme, I would love for anybody who would love to participate in something like this. A group art session where people are out painting, drawing, sketching, doing whatever it is that creatively fulfills you. If you don't think that you're good enough to show somebody or do your work in front of people or something like that, I want you most of all to come to this.
Yeah.
Because I want you to be facilitated by this and see the very
see that you're
real
wrong about that
process and that you're wrong. Exactly.
Yeah.
You need to imply
take those risks. Even if you fail, you're going to learn something from those failures.
I could tell you as a true testament, 2 years ago, I didn't draw a stick figure to save my life. And I always said that was not my thing. And just being in a new situation that awarded new opportunities and becoming passionate about something completely different has put me into a new field of work that I'm doing that I absolutely love, that I, just couldn't imagine not doing it. And it's amazing because it's just, you got to just tell yourself you can do it. So, yeah.
Whoa.
But
and of course, as I'm trying to grab a couple quick pictures at the end here, I end up smacking my mic and dropping everything and making a big ruckus.
Well, that is time for us to go ahead and wrap up. Thank you very much for coming on the show.
Guys.
We're super glad to have you on. This is a very, very informative podcast, and we love these ones. Very different. I don't think we've ever had anything of this nature on before. And it's good to see you, even after all these years of doing that. You're married now and all of these things, and I hope that that's all going well. Exactly. So, it's been a long time coming for this moment to happen since I've known you, right? Well,
who would have known?
Who would have known?
Who
would have thunk? Anyways, thanks for tuning in, and as always, let it bleed.
Oh, we said the thing.